I recently realized that I never really nailed down my top 10 favorite games, and I thought, well, the best way is to take them one system at a time. I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games, and today we're looking at my top 10 Atari 2600 games.
Second Opinion Games.
Number 10, Beam Rider. This is a darn good use of the color blue here, and it somewhat takes place on a grid. Now, this isn't the very best version of this game by far, but as far as 2600 standards goes, this is pretty darn cool. You move back and forth on this grid-like platform, and you shoot down space aliens. Sometimes they'll be firing back at you, or rocks will jump at you, and you have to move out of the way. The controls are fluid and perfect, just like a good game should have, but you also have some torpedoes that are super long range, and they're going to be used to take out the mothership after you take out 15 of these little guy enemies, and then you warp to the next sector and take all the enemies out all over again. But this time, they're a little more aggressive. Now, you only have 3 of those torpedoes, which means sometimes those motherships will get away. But don't worry, you'll get them next time. In upper levels, it starts getting really frantic, and that's where the game really starts to shine on how fun it truly is. Beam Rider is a no-brainer, and it's also one of the more expensive games that you can get for your Atari 2600. Number 9, Joust. Flying around on giant ostriches sounds like a bad idea because ostriches can't fly. However, they do in this game, and the goal is to slightly hit your opponent a little bit like above the halfway mark. If it's a little below the halfway mark, well, then you will be jousted off your bird and be dead. When you do so in this game, at least, it seems to turn into like a feather, which will respawn a more violent opponent if you let it hatch. Because, you know, in every other Joust game, these are eggs, but because the programmers couldn't figure out how to make an egg react in this environment, well, then they just have a feather floating around. Also, you have to watch out to not fall into the lava here. I like the use of the color red, and the whole game just plays great, especially because you don't have to flap your wings nearly as hard as you did like in the arcade version of the game. So the controls do feel even more refined than the arcade version itself. And watch out for those fire pterodactyls because they will rip you to shreds, and it is fun to see what level you could eventually get to. And it gets exponentially more fun when you add a second player to the mix. Sometimes you'll work together, and other times you're gonna be mortal enemies. Either way, you're guaranteed to have a great time. Number 8, Halo 2600. This game was made by Ed Fries, the father of the original Xbox, where he handed out 100 copies in Las Vegas personally. I happen to have one of those personally handed out copies that's even signed by Ed Fries himself, and that might be why I consider it to be one of my favorite games. Other than the fact that, you know, it's Halo on the 2600. The opening music even sounds as good as the 2600 could sound, and the Master Chief runs around trying to collect a gun and then defeats all those Covenant enemies. He also has to pick up keys for some reason to open up some doors. I could speedrun this entire game in about 6 minutes, which ends with a giant boss battle. Well, it's kind of giant at least. Well, the Master Chief has been shrunk down to size, and you have to take out this mothership. It's kind of cool, and when you do so, you're ready to play it all over again. Now, you used to be able to play on Halo2600.com, but sadly, that has been shut down. So the only way to play it now is either through emulation or on your personalized signed copy. Number 7, Jungle Hunt. This was originally a Tarzan game, if you can believe that, which is super easy to believe because there's a guy swinging on vines running through the jungle. And is that parallax scrolling? That's darn impressive for an Atari 2600 game. This is one of these games that has a lot going on. You start off swinging from vines, and then you're swimming with the crocodiles. You have to watch out about your air consumption right here too, and trying to stab the crocodiles with your little tiny knife is really hard to do. Then there's boulders that you have to jump over. The small ones aren't really much of a problem, but those big ones are guaranteed to flatten your ass. And that's where the majority of the difficulty comes in this game. At least until you get to the cannibals that are bouncing back and forth, and jumping over these guys is pixel perfect precise. If you mess up the littlest bit, you will die. That means a high amount of pressure here. But if you jump past 2 of them, then you'll be having an epic dance party with your best girl before she's kidnapped and you have to do it all over again, only much harder this time. Number 6, Solaris, another graphically impressive spaceship flying game for the 2600 where you have to manage your fuel supply and move around a map trying to save entire star systems. If the planet in each system blows up, well then it turns into a total hellscape with lots of explosion effects, and it just makes it pretty much unplayable. Luckily, you can just jump to another sector and try and clear out all of the bad guys. Sometimes you'll be making death runs and trying to pick up the keys and blast through an area, and it is so freaking fun. Other times you'll be rescuing some people from planets, refueling, and blasting to the next star system, I guess trying to find the planet Solaris. I'm not really sure what you're supposed to do other than kill all of your opponents, which is incredibly difficult to do with just 2 lives. That's probably why I haven't beat the game in the 35 plus years that I've owned it. Number 5, Donkey Kong. Here's Mario as few people have seen him before, looking extra chubby with a huge nose. Now this is a severely dumbed down version of Donkey Kong. Matter of fact, the giant monkey himself looks like a cookie monster throwing cookies rather than barrels. But I gotta give it to the people that made this game, at least it's a little bit of fun. You can still pick up a hammer and smash things, climbing the ladders feels very natural, and jumping over everything is darn right doable. And then you make it to the next level where you're trying to collect the rivets, and it becomes rather challenging here, just trying to get the timing down just right with the fireballs moving back and forth frequently. However, it's somewhat anticlimactic because when you do eventually take out the giant monkey, nothing happens. It just throws you back to the beginning of the game, forcing you to do it all over again. This is one that I have a great time with for about 5 minutes at a time. After that, I don't want to play it for at least another week before I come right back to it. And that's a sign of a darn good game, how often you want to keep on playing. Number 4, Princess Rescue, another Mario game, but this one's a bit more unofficial. It's our second and last homebrew game in the best of the 2600, where you play as Mario. Now, I don't usually play with the Sega Genesis controller, even if it is a lot better than the Atari 2600 controller. Hey, yeah, it really does work, and in this game it works extra well because you have more than one button, which you will need to launch your fireballs. Also, the controls here aren't really that good. Sometimes I slip and fall off edges that most of the time you wouldn't slip and fall off if this was a traditional Mario game. But it's cool to see how well they recreated the Mario universe on the 2600 itself. Even the music when clearing the level sounds right, and there's even thwomps, which is more than the original Super Mario Brothers could have done. There's bullet bills, there's turtle shells that you can throw, coins to collect, and lots of fun to be had here. I believe there's only 4 worlds in the entire game, and you only have a handful of lives to bring down Bowser and save that princess. And it's fun every second. Number 3, Kung Fu Masters. Now this game did come out for the Nintendo and it was great for that system, but there's something about the Atari 2600 version that keeps me coming back to it. Yeah, it's super tough. The controls are kinda stiff, and the fact that he kicks and I couldn't actually figure out what it was for the first 10 years of my life, because does this look like a kick? Heck no. There's even midgets that you can try and punch in the face, and all the bosses you try to punch in the nuts, and this is so darn cool. Also, you could beat this game if you're super good, but just trying to get past the second level feels nearly impossible. But if you could do so and you have the patience for it, this is one of the coolest 2600 games ever. and it's unbelievable to see just how hard they could have pushed the system at the time, competing with the Nintendo itself. Number 2, Surround. Who needs music, sound effects, or even graphics to have a great game? No, all you need is great gameplay itself, where you play as a dot against a friend, trying to figure out which one can outsmart the other as you move around the screen and try and circle and enclose them in. Now, sometimes you could play just a normal game to 10, or other times you could add diagonals into the mix. You could have the walls be gone, so when you run out one side, you come out another. Or you could just set it up for a free game of paint, which then you'll probably try to draw some World War II iconography. But you probably shouldn't be doing that. Instead, you should be focusing in on the game itself, which is a ton of fun. I've spent so many hours with friends, enemies, and even my kids trying to maneuver my way around this game and show that I am the master thinker in the house. And sometimes they still beat me, because this game is pretty much meant for anyone of any age to be able to jump in and play it. When a standard 5-year-old can outwit a grown adult, that makes for one crazy video game. And then you can't wait to jump back into another match to see if they can do it all over again. The only reason it's not number 1 on my list is because you absolutely need 2 people to play this game. But that's a really small nitpick for what otherwise is a perfect 2600 game. Closing in on number 1, there's a lot of games that still get sequels to this very day, in the Asteroids, Space Invaders, Pitfalls, all classic games for the Atari 2600. But the one I love the most never got a sequel. Of course, I'm talking about Hero. It's a game where you have a helicopter strapped to your back, and you're trying to fly through mines to save miners. And also you're trying to blow up areas with explosives, and you have to watch out because these explosives can blow you up too. You also have laser beams that you shoot out of your eyeballs, and tons of levels to play through. Now, resource management is key because you can completely screw yourself in this game by setting off too many bombs. Also, by jumping into a room and turning off the light switch when you didn't mean to means that you most likely are going to die. Some areas you can't touch at all. You even have fuel in your helicopter that you have to manage in order to pilot your way around these caverns. And I'm just blown away by how many levels there actually are. I would love to see the very end of this one day, but for right now, I am perfectly happy throwing it in one time a week just to see how much farther I could get until eventually I completely master it. Most of the time when I die here, it's all my fault and making a stupid decision, and it's never fault of the great gameplay that is going on. I don't know why someone doesn't make a sequel to this excellent game. I've played crap tons of versions of it, and as of now, I think the Atari 2600 is the very best one. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it because when I'm playing my Atari 2600, it just brings me back to when I was a kid again. And pretty much every time I play the console, I play through each of these games because they really are that good. Other than Surround, if I don't have someone around with me, I sadly can't play that one. So I want to know, what's your favorite ColecoVision game? Because that's the console I'm going to tackle next, and I would really like to know if my favorites are your favorites. So until later, I will see you again, guys.